I am a temple worker inside of those big, beautiful buildings called temples built by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There's a lot of mystery that goes on, a lot of questions around these temples, and I want to share with you the inside scoop of what it's like to work inside a Latter-day Saint temple. On this episode, I'll be answering a series of questions about what it's like to be a Latter-day Saint temple worker. And then I will also answer a series of questions that people might have about temples in general, and hopefully those will be helpful to you as well. Okay, let's get started with my first question, and that is, what does a temple worker do? Well, a temple worker does probably two categories of things, and that is, the first is helps administer sacred ordinances, and the second is just helps with background tasks to keep things flowing. So the sacred ordinances are things like helping do the washings and anointings, helping administer the endowment, assisting in sealings in any way, and those are like actually, connected to the direct ordinances. And then also a great portion of the time is just the background stuff, which means standing in different areas of the temple to help guide people to where they're trying to go, or tidying up the restrooms, or helping do laundry, and those kinds of things. And you might be wondering which of the ordinances I help with. Well, I administer ordinances to other females as part of a priesthood authorized ordinance in the washing and anointings. And so I lay hands on patrons and provide temple authorized priesthood blessings within that space. And then the spaces that are gender mixed with the endowment and the sealings, then there's a male temple worker who administers those ordinances. The second question I have is, how did I become a temple worker? Well, I became a temple worker basically by volunteering. I let my bishop know that my husband and I wanted to work in the temple. And we have two temples in our area, actually three if you count another one that's kind of close. And so there's a huge need for people to work. I think any given temple, at least in my area, it takes about 3,000 workers. And I could be wrong on that, but it's open 5 days a week, and there's 4 shifts per day. So that's 20 shifts they have to cover. And then each shift has, I think, 150 workers per shift. I've done the math. It's around 3,000 workers. And some people will take more than one shift. But nonetheless, it's a really big number of workers to run the temples that are around here. If they're smaller temples, maybe there'd be less workers. But the size of ours is pretty big. So that's a lot. And I know that they needed us. And so my husband and I wanted to do it. So we just let our leaders know we were interested, and then they called us in and did an interview, and then we were given the green light to go ahead. A second way that people become temple workers is just by invitation. If they don't volunteer and they need more workers, then you might be actually pulled aside and asked, hey, will you do this? Either way, it's fine, but I took the volunteer route, so that's how I did it. Okay, next question is, what is a typical temple shift like? Well, my temple shift is from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. roughly. So it's 4 hours of actually working in the temple. I'm usually done closer to 9:30, but we have to be there half an hour early at 5:30 for a prayer meeting. So we all go in and change into our temple white clothes and then go into a prayer meeting that lasts about half an hour, where they go over procedures. Every time we go in there, we have kind of 2 different things happening in that meeting. One is the prayer portion, sing a song, say a prayer, talk about, the sacred nature of what we're doing, try to get in that right spirit. Because obviously if you've been busy and flustered and a nervous Nancy all day, you want to let that energy off and be in a calm, I would say reverent, receptive spiritual frame of mind, so that you can be a welcoming presence to the patrons who come to worship in the temple. So part of the prayer meeting is devoted to, just coming into that good space, like I say, prayer and song and some discussion around sacred things. And then another portion of that meeting is the policies and procedures. Last week or the week before, we just started taking temple recommends by phone. Instead of showing a paper recommend, now people can scan on their phones. They've got a digital recommend. So they went over the procedure. If you're working the front recommend desk, how you go about, verifying on the phone, the procedure's a little different. So those kinds of things. And I think the week before we went over emergency procedures if someone, needed medical care, like who has the medical alert system and how you access them, those kinds of things. So part of it is like policies, procedures kinds of thing. And another part is more like spiritual preparation, just so that we're all trained and ready with the procedures, but also in the right frame of mind. So continuing on, talking about what a typical temple shift is like. After we get out of that prayer meeting, we've got, 3.5-ish hours of duties. And at the beginning of each shift, each temple worker gets a little card that shows just what their assignments are. And so they rotate around. You might be in one place for anywhere from half an hour to like an hour and a half. Sometimes as short as 15 minutes, but usually not that short. And so you'll have a series of different stations that you're posted at, and you just kind of follow down your schedule and report to the different posts. And a typical schedule for me might be going and being a host, like at some stairs, just greeting people, welcome to the temple, welcome to the temple. And then after that station is done, then I'll go do initiatories where I do the priesthood ordinations within the women. It's all women working on women. And then maybe I'll switch over to restroom attendant and go, wipe down, sinks if they need that. And then maybe I'll go work at the recommend desk and check people's recommends as they come in. Then another week I might be assigned to help officiate in an endowment session with my husband. So we both just sit in the front and, we're just kind of keeping track of everybody during the endowment. And then after that, I help people work through the veil, which is a portion of the endowment ceremony. And after that, I might go sit in a chair in a hallway and greet people and answer any questions they might have. And then maybe I'd go be a chapel coordinator and help take people up to a session or check names when people go into the chapel. So there's just tons of little jobs, and a lot of them are greeting patrons and quietly standing in hallways just to be a welcoming presence. And then a lot of them are more hands-on as well. And I only gave you probably 10% of an idea of what all the jobs are available, but there's tons of jobs. It's very busy. If you go in a temple, it is quiet. It's so calm, but underneath there's just a lot of action going on. So when I'm done with my shift, then I go down into the dressing room, change back into street clothes, and go hang out in a waiting room for my husband to be done, and then we go home. So that's kind of the typical temple shift. Okay, another question is, what are the most common questions or needs that patrons might have? I really don't run into a whole lot of questions. I don't get asked a ton of different of questions, nothing too out of pocket. It's usually just, hey, where's the nearest bathroom, or where's the water fountain, or which way to the dressing room? Those are usually the main questions that I answer. Sometimes, I have had probably the craziest question I ever had, and this is not that crazy, is when I was working at the temple recommend desk for the people who come in and do baptisms, and a lady rushed in just looking super flustered, and she says, how do I for sure reserve like 50 slots for like 2 months from now for somebody, because we're bringing a huge group of youth? And I'm like, I have no idea. You just have to go online. And she's like, no, online won't let me. Tell me how to do it. And I'm like, I'm just here for half an hour, and then I rotate somewhere else. I don't run the computers. I'm not really sure what to tell you. So, that's probably about as extreme as it ever has gotten for me, which is not that extreme. Okay, another question is, what is the atmosphere like inside a temple from a temple worker's perspective? I love being a temple worker because for me, the atmosphere is just, I would say, I'm trying to think of the word. Being a temple worker has normalized the atmosphere of the temple for me. It used to feel like I was a patron for 30 years before I ever became a temple worker. And to me, the temple always just felt so reverent, like you couldn't even sneeze or you'd get in trouble, which is silly because that's not at all the truth. But I just felt like, oh my gosh, I'm scared to like say or do anything wrong. And what if, I can only go exactly down the right hallways to the right places, which was just me feeling nervous is all, that I just didn't know what to expect sometimes. Now that I'm a temple worker, it has made me feel just a lot more calm and confident about the temple. because I've seen it from this insider's perspective, where there are people having quiet little side conversations. As temple workers, we can quietly say a little joke to each other, go to the break room and have a treat. Before or after different aspects of our shifts, we'll share information and joke. And, it's just normal people inside the temple quietly trying to be very respectful and reverent about what we're doing, but we're having normal conversations with each other just as adults. So it almost feels social in some ways. Now, it's not social during the actual ordinances or when you're quietly doing your duties, but as you're coming and going, there's little niceties that are exchanged, and when you're in the training meeting or the waiting rooms or whatever, you just get to know people. And what's really cool is, as I've gotten to know some of the women there, just hearing their stories, all of them have normal problems, family difficulties or health problems or things they're worried about. And, some of them, they're just normal people too. Like the lady who's in charge of our shift, she's the shift coordinator. And, you would think like this lady in this level of authority in the temple, she'd just be always an angel. But she's funny. She's, she'll walk up to me and be like, oh, I'm overwhelmed right now, or whatever. And one time she said to me, do you think Cafe Rio would deliver here? Like she's just super down to earth. And, most people are. And I love that, because I used to think it's just like everyone who worked there were perfect and you had to be perfect. But what I've really learned by being a worker is they're just normal people, and we're there having a nice time. We try to be very reverent and aware, but we're just normal people. So I have absolutely loved having kind of like a normalizing experience where you're not like scared of where do you walk, what do you say, what if you do something wrong? Because again, because I had never been a temple worker, I just thought it was kind of rigid like that. But now I'm like, it's fine. If you needed to walk down a different hallway or if you needed to ask a question, you're fine. But I didn't know that till I became a temple worker. So it's been a good experience for me. Okay, another question is, what is one of the most rewarding aspects of being a temple worker? And I would say a couple of things. One of them is what I just alluded to a second ago, which is how normalizing this whole experience has been. Just meeting normal people, having normal personalities and normal experiences in life who just happen to be temple workers. It has helped me feel more relaxed and calm in the temple, like it's more of a home instead of a place where I have to feel nervous, like, oh, I have to be so quiet and perfect all the time. It just has made it feel more comfortable and homey. And probably the other biggest, I would say, rewarding aspect has been the more I go, the more I like it. So instead of it feeling kind of like, oh, I know I'm supposed to go to the temple to perform work for my ancestors, it's something that's like a commandment, instead of that, it's like, no, I actually want to go. I enjoy it. So it's taken it out of the realm of like, I have to, which, by the way, for those who are watching who are not LDS, you don't have to. No one makes you. It's just, I would like to do that. It's just like anything. I have to clean the bathroom. It's not because anyone's holding a gun to my head. It's because I would like the clean bathroom. And that's why I'm saying I have to go clean the bathroom, is because I want it to be clean. No one's making me. It's the same thing with going to the temple. When I say I have to go, it's because like I want to. I want the benefits. It's not because anyone's forcing me. I just have to say that because I get funky comments about people thinking that I'm, forced to do things or that I'm trying to force people to do things. Nope, that's not the case. But it has taken going to the temple out of this like area where I'm going, oh, it's kind of an obligation that I know that I need to do for my ancestors or whatever. Instead, it's like, no, I actually enjoy it. It's more relaxing and I don't know, chill somehow. Okay, another question is, what is some advice I might give to someone considering becoming a temple worker? I would say, well, if you feel like you have room in your life, then do it, but you have to make sure you've got the space in your life. I'm in a stage of life where I've got the space, but check yourself and make sure, can you really commit to every week, or maybe it's every other week, just depends, giving up that 4 or 5 hours. Count the cost first. Make sure that you're going to be able to do that, because once you sign up to be a temple worker, you're on that schedule every week until you're released from that calling, and it's usually like a couple of years. You can get substitutes, but if you're going to leave town, you have to get a substitute to cover you. Now, if you were sick at the last minute and you couldn't get a substitute, you'd let the coordinator know and they'd figure it out. But we have a computer system where you go in and you post your shift, just like any other job. If you want to get coverage, you've got to get coverage for this too. But there is something called the Temple Worker Portal where you go online, you can post your shift for someone to pick it up. You can pick up other shifts if people are trying to get rid of shifts, but you do need to make sure it's covered. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, because that's really the biggest thing. It's just the practical aspect of can you sacrifice that time? Can you afford it? And just know what you're committing to, that it's a commitment. Like if you say you're going to do it, you need to show up and do it and not leave people hanging, because they pre-assign everyone to their little stations around the temple. And if people aren't in their station, then the whole thing doesn't flow. So you have to be willing to commit. I guess just on a personal level of preparation, I mean, obviously you need to feel like you have a testimony in the restored gospel and need to have a temple recommend. But other than that, if you have a desire to do it, do it. It's been a huge blessing in my life and I love it so much. Okay, that is the end of my section of just answering like personal questions about my experience in the temple. But I did want to take a few minutes and answer questions that you might have if you're not a member of the church about the temple experience, because there's a lot of misinformation online, and I want to help provide some counterbalance to that. So one question I have here is, what is the difference between a Latter-day Saint church building and a temple? Well, there's a pretty big difference, because at a Latter-day Saint church building, visitors are welcome anytime. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a member or not, just come join the church service. You're welcome to do that. And what happens in the church service is basic Sunday worship, and then the sacrament is given, and anyone can participate in that. But in the temple, we do holy saving ordinances for the dead. We believe that ancestors who have passed on are worthy of saving. And if they have not received those covenants with God, that we can do those for them. And then they have the right to accept or reject those covenants. It does not force them to have those covenants, but they've been done. So then if they want them, then they have that opportunity to live within a covenant relationship with Jesus Christ and Heavenly Father. So the difference between a church building and a temple is the temple is where we do that work to help our ancestors, and of course for ourselves too. We go and get that work done for ourselves first, and then after we have done our own ordinances, then we go on and do that for our ancestors. So that's the primary difference. And so with a temple being a place where sacred ordinances are performed, then there's a lot of controls around that, because there are rituals and ordinances that are ritualistically performed within the temple that you have to control the spaces, who's there, are the witnesses present, is, quiet, contained space. Like, it has to be very, very orderly. And so that's why temples are protected, and, it's a very orderly, sanctimonious atmosphere. The second question is, why can't everyone go in once a temple is dedicated? Okay, so there's a temple before it's dedicated is just a building. And we have open houses where people can come and walk through it and see all the rooms and, cool. But after it's dedicated, that's just where we give a prayer to God to say, okay, now we are turning this over to you. It's your house now. Like, it's an official recognition that this now is God's house. It's pressing the go button on now this is a sacred, protected space. And so after it's dedicated, you have to have what's called the temple recommend to get in. And the temple recommend is just a series of questions to show your worthiness before God so that you can enter this sacred space. And I was thinking about this the other day, that it makes a lot of sense from my perspective as a therapist about having like a protected sacred space. Because when I'm in therapy with a client, I consider that a protected, I would say almost sacred place. Not just anyone is allowed, because there's something very specific happening in that room. It's all around this person and their needs and what we're working on. And so if just anyone were to walk in, it would completely hijack, what's going on. So also, you might say, well, what's the difference between making therapy private and making it toxically secret? Well, the difference is, if it's private, it's in the service of that person, and we're just providing that that clarity around who's allowed into the therapy room as a service to that person to create a safe space for the therapy to happen. But a toxic secret therapy would be if I was doing harm and telling them not to tell, or they were telling me things that they were doing that were going to harm themselves and I wouldn't tell anybody. So if it was causing like this toxic level of harm, then that's nasty secrets. That's no good. And that's not what the temple is all about. It's more like the first scenario in therapy, where it's a private space so that you can have protection around what is happening here that is precious and needs protected. That I feel like is a good mirror for what is going on in the temple. Another question is, do we earn salvation by racking up temple points? No, absolutely not. We are not going to be saved based on how many times we go to the temple. We are saved because Jesus Christ loves us, and because we are reaching for his grace, and because we're in relationship with him. But as part of Latter-day Saints' walk with Jesus Christ is helping bring people to him, helping bring others to him by performing sacred temple ordinances. So what we do in the temple is out of love and care for our ancestors. It's not because we're trying to rack up temple points. Another question is, what are the purposes of temples? I think I've kind of already alluded to this, but the whole point of temples is to redeem the dead. So people who have passed on, ancestors who did not have sacred ordinances, they did not have the chance to make covenants with God. God loves them. They are worth saving. So he has asked people who are living to make those ordinances real for these people who've passed on, so that the people who've passed on can have a chance to claim those ordinances for themselves or reject them. Either way, God is totally fair. He's offering them for everyone, and it's up to the individuals whether they will take those ordinances or not. That is really what it's all about. It's no more complicated than that. Okay, one more question, and then I think we'll wrap it up. Do non-members ever get to go into the temple? So there's two times when a person who is not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or one that is but is not a temple recommend holder, would be allowed to go inside of a temple. And the first one would be, obviously during an open house. Anyone can, right? Everyone's invited. The community's invited. The second one is if there's an emergency medical worker that needs to come in and help one of our patrons who's having a health event, then they can just come in. We just let emergency medical workers in when we have requested them to come, and we can see that that's who they are, and they come and help the patron, and then they leave. So not a problem. All right, I hope that was really helpful, kind of seeing an inside scoop. I know this is something that I probably would have loved hearing a few years ago before I became a temple worker. Be sure to put in the comments below if you have any questions that are honest in nature and kind-hearted. I would love to answer those. Thank you so much. I hope this helps, and I'll see you next time.